couple of minutes to kind of talk about my position on this. I've vacillated on this back and forth and back and forth. And I think as far as the other parts of the regulation is concerned, I'm fully behind those. And the one issue that I have is if we're going to talk about the 50 BMG and the calibers, are we talking about long-range shooting? Because if we are, there's other rifles out there and systems in place, such as the Gunworks and some of these other rifle systems that I've seen in the field. I had an opportunity to Africa to hunt with a gentleman that had a Gunworks rifle, and he shot 600, 800, 900-yard shots. So if it's long-range shooting that we're thinking about regulating, 50 caliber or 06, whatever the Gunworks weapon is already in existence. So my feeling is at this time that maybe we're looking at this in the wrong way. Maybe it's muzzleloader energy or muzzle energy that we need to regulate, and not the caliber or the case length or anything of that issue. So that's what I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Valentine. Commissioner Drew.
Tyler, just to ask a question before I kind of get into some of my points in regards to the gentleman that had the concerns with handicap and Mr. Dixon who brought up the and or language. Again, this is language that we vetted through the folks who host handicapped hunts. They don't believe it's going to restrict at least the existing technology to allow someone who's quadriplegic, paraplegic to hunt, correct?
That's correct. In talking to Nevada Outdoorsmen in wheelchairs, like I said, their system uses a little miniature hydraulic ram that mechanically closes on the trigger.
And if I'm not mistaken, they also have like a computer screen or like a tablet that they can sight out of, and that's not going to be affected by this.
Correct. They built a little rudimentary sort of a phone scope type device that basically just sticks your smartphone on the scope so that the hunter can watch the screen and tell when they're getting the crosshairs lined up. The rifle rest has a couple different arms that they control with a joystick. Some have controlled it with a chin if they're missing limbs. Some can control it with their hands or a leg. And with that joystick and a couple hydraulic rams can move those crosshairs up, down, left, or right until they're on target, and then depress the shoot switch, and that shoot switch compresses that hydraulic ram that depresses the trigger, so that language wouldn't affect it. As for futures technologies coming out for disabled hunters, it's a little bit hard to predict. I'm with you. I have the utmost respect for our military people, especially those who come home wounded. My father's a Vietnam vet. I certainly don't want to do anything that's going to hinder their abilities, but reaching out to the two groups I could find that do participate in that, they're both comfortable with this language.
And I guess that's what I'm getting at. And it's unfortunate we had a discussion yesterday about accommodating people to help folks that are handicapped in retrieving game. And if I thought this regulation would prohibit your use or ability to hunt now or in the future, I would absolutely not be in favor of it. And if something emerges that for some reason gets looped in with this, I think that's why this board exists, to address that. But at this time, I think technology exists to allow that. And so I appreciate you bringing it up, but we have been very diligent in making sure that we didn't cross that line. And I want you to make sure that not only do we appreciate your service, but we understand what you're dealing with and have taken a lot of steps to ensure that we aren't infringing on that. So I just wanted to make that point. In terms of some of the comments regarding the comments that we've received, to be honest, out of state, in state, whether you hunt or not, I read all the letters all the same. I think there's good points made by people from all walks of life, whether you hunt, whether you don't. And so I know comments were maybe made on that. It doesn't matter to me. I read them all the same. Does the NRA have some sort of bearing? Do we take that seriously? I can't speak for my fellow commissioners, but absolutely. Just like any other group. Mr. Fortuna, if it's your group or anyone else is in this room who decides to send correspondence, and at the same time I reserve the right to respectfully disagree with any individual or any group. So absolutely, that's something I've personally taken into consideration. The comment was made that ethics are taught and not regulated. I wish that's the way the world worked. I wish people always did the right thing. If that were the case, Mr. Turnipseed wouldn't have a job, and my job sitting in this position would be one hell of a lot easier, because these are always the most difficult discussions that we have. And to be honest, we are provided through NRS, through Nevada Revised Statute, the authority to regulate the method of take. And I can't think of any method of take discussion that doesn't somehow tie back to ethics. Does it make our job easy? No, it makes it extremely difficult. I do think in this case we're being more proactive than reactive. I understand that there's other calibers of rifles that, shooting out to 1,000, maybe 1,200, 1,500 yards, that ship has sailed. This regulation isn't going to affect that. But with some of these calibers and some of the things that we're talking about, I think we're talking about shots in excess of that. And it never used to be an issue. My grandfather asked me what we were talking about today, and I mentioned the 50 caliber, and he said, "Who the hell uses a 50 caliber to hunt?" That's his perception of the world. And it never used to be an issue. But those things are becoming more and more common, more and more available. And so I think we do at least deserve ourselves, or deserve it to our traditions, to have these discussions. And at what point do you make a regulation? And that's where we're at today. In terms of the process, this hasn't been a short process. It hasn't been willy-nilly, without discussion, without changes. I think when we started this, we had an overall load length. I think we had 46 caliber. So we've made changes, we've made adjustments. We've had at least 2 formal workshops. We took extra comment when we were in Elko, and by all rights, we didn't need to. So I'm comfortable with the process. The county advisory boards have had multiple opportunities to look at this. We've had some that started out dead set against it, that are now supportive. So I think it's inaccurate to say that the cabs are unanimously opposed. I know of at least 4, and I've attended their meetings or read their workshops. Lincoln, Carson, Douglas, White Pine, all those that I'm aware of are in support of the regulation as written. I was at the Lincoln County meeting on Tuesday night. They cited specific instances where weapons like this would cause a problem within their county. Thought it was pretty forward thinking, and it was a great discussion. So from that standpoint, based on the comments I heard, those are the things I wanted to address. I really started off on the fence in terms of the caliber and load length. There's nothing, and I think people will attest to this, there's nothing more important to me than ensuring our traditions, whether it be hunting, fishing, or wildlife enjoyment going forward. I think this regulation helps in that regards. I think it is proactive, and so I'm going to be supportive. But I didn't come to that decision easily. My consideration of it is much longer than my ramblings here today, and I'd be happy to discuss my decision with anyone going forward. So that's where I'm at personally.
Thank you, Commissioner Drew. Commissioner McNitch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, a couple of comments on some of the public comment that was made. There were, the concept of not taking the NRA position lightly. Me personally, I don't take that position lightly. Their opinion, I don't take anybody's opinion lightly. There's a lot more than just the NRA position on it. There's a lot of different thoughts on it. I don't take any of them lightly. So, from my standpoint, I appreciate that. I never feel like this commission gets locked into that perspective. So I do appreciate about this commission, as I do feel like there's a broader consideration. There was a comment about hunters declining. I don't think this is a hunters declining numbers issue. Per capita, that's true. On a general numbers, I don't believe that that's true. I think that the number of hunters in this country is continuing to climb. It's the per capita that I believe is falling. So I don't think it's a recruitment issue necessarily. I think that people are still coming into the sport. I don't think it's because they have the opportunity to shoot 50 caliber or large weapons at animals that's doing that. I think that there's other factors driving that. I do agree that perception is reality. And it's for that reason that my decision to support this is really founded on the public perception, for me, is everything. We've got an agency that's in one of the most urban states in the country, and by nature, that means that they're going to have less trust from the general public. That's just the nature of the beast. And I think that I think the general public is very supportive of the concept of hunting. I think how you do it will change their opinion. And I don't have surveys to tell me where that line is in the sand when it comes to calibers. But for me, when I start hearing about using military weapons or military grade type guns to take game, it starts to throw the question in my mind, okay, where does that line at? Where's it at? And I do see this as a reasonable place to draw that line, and I do believe it'll help manage public perception and maintain the trust for the agency. And I think that that's one of the most paramount things for me is setting this agency up to move forward. That means maintaining some level of balance.
Can you speak in your mic? It sounds like Reno can't hear you. It looks like.
I wish you'd have said that earlier. Because I was just wrapping up. So my decision to support this, to support the proposal, is based on managing a public perception that somewhere along the way is going to start to change based on where that line is drawn. And I think that we're close to that line. I don't know how much more to fine tune it at this point. So that's just where I'm at with it.
Commissioner Barnes.
Thank you, Commissioner Wallace. Just sitting here looking at the notes that I've made on the bottom of my page, and it sounds like I'm going to kind of ramble. This has kind of been a tough issue for me. It's one when I first saw the material, I thought I pretty much had my mind made up. I did listen to the Elko cab, and the point there was brought up, like we heard here, is that this is more of we're trying to regulate ethics, which I think, maybe ethics shouldn't be regulated. But then when you look at a lot of the other stuff that this board does, that's basically what we end up doing. And so I've listened to a lot of the comments, and I agree with Commissioner Allenberg, is that where do we limit this thing? So I agree with a lot of the other commissioners too. But because I'm a new commissioner and just got on this board, I got on this because I respect the process that this state has. I like the cab system. I like this system. And I think there's a lot of diligence that goes in to working on these regulations. And we've heard it twice already. I haven't, but it's gone through the process. And so I guess where I am right now is that because I believe in this system and from what I've heard, I'm going to be in support of this regulation.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnes. Vice Chairman Johnston.
Thank you, Chairman Wallace. I'd like to just go through some of the comments, and the cabs were split. I read through the cab reports. I don't think there was uniform or even majority opposition to this regulation from the cabs, but a fairly even split. And I noted one of the things, and I believe it was the Douglas cab reading their minutes, that there was a motion to oppose the regulation or the 50 cal ban. And that motion failed following a discussion in which one of the cab members said, sportsmen need to place limitations by themselves on their own activity. Because if the sportsmen don't, then you turn the non-hunting public who supports hunting into anti-hunting public members of the public. And then when they had that discussion about sportsmen being proactive in placing some limitations, maybe it is an ethical limitation, what it comes down to, that keeps those members of the non-hunting public who support hunting, even though they don't participate, they continue to support it because the sportsmen are addressing issues on their own. And I thought, and then after that discussion, I noticed that the Douglas County cab voted to support the regulation as proposed. And I thought that discussion in their minutes was well grounded. I don't believe the regulation as proposed would foreclose accommodation to those with disabilities in the future. If I did, I, like Commissioner Drew, would not be supportive of this. I would give great pause. But I believe we will always endeavor to accommodate those with disabilities in all manners, as we were addressing yesterday and will continue to do as issues arise in that regard. There was, I don't want to repeat what everyone said, but I do want to address certain things. Do I take the NRA's opposition to this regulation lightly? No. But just because the NRA stands up and says they're opposed to it doesn't mean that's going to cause me to be opposed to it. I take their opposition and give it the same weight as I do all other public comment. And I'm a gun owner, I'm a proud gun owner. I was reading an article the other day, I'm apparently a super gun owner. In a news article I was reading the other day, because I have more than 10 firearms. But I'm not a member of the NRA. And that's just a personal decision I've made. So just because one group does or does not support the regulation, I take all the comments that came in, whether they're out of state, in state, for or against, I read them all and try to give them due consideration. There was the suggestion that, well, if this can't be used for hunting, then the next argument would be then you ban it. And that's just not, it's not accurate. The Supreme Court says you have a right to bear arms, and the reason you have the right to bear arms is to protect yourself in case of confrontation. So whether a weapon can or cannot be used legally to hunt animals in Nevada or elsewhere does not affect the Second Amendment issue and whether or not a subsequent ban would be appropriate. But I find one thing I haven't heard from all the opponents to this regulation is how a ban like this would in any way affect anyone's opportunity or ability to hunt big game in the state of Nevada. I have not heard that. I have heard they don't want the ban, but I haven't heard how it impacts anybody's ability. And it doesn't impact anyone's ability to engage in long-range shooting if that is what they want to do. If they want to spend the time at the range with the setup, with the modern scopes, and learn those ballistics and that still opportunity exists. In fact, the way I read this regulation, if a 50 caliber round was developed with a case length of 3 inches or less, it would be legal. So it's not a ban on 50 caliber rounds. It's a ban on certain types of 50 caliber rounds. And I don't know if such a round exists. It might be developed as a result of this regulation. But the regulation is larger than 50 caliber or a center fire cartridge with a case length of more than 3 inches. So if you had a case length of 3 inches or less and caliber of 50, seems it would be permissible. I don't think we can simply say it's up to the hunter. In all regards, we have a number of regulations that exist. A lot of those regulations, I think, reflect an ethical decision as to what you can and can't use in terms of method of take for a variety of species. It seems to me we're getting out ahead of a potential issue, and we're just going to draw a line and say in the state of Nevada, we're not going this far on the types of weapons that can be used. And I just don't have a problem supporting this. I don't believe it implicates the Second Amendment. I don't think it's going to impact people's ability to hunt how they see fit. It's just going to put an outer restriction, much the same we have limitations on shotguns that can be used on other species. And it seems to be consistent with existing regulations on firearm use in hunting activities. So for that reason, I support it. I support all the other parts of the proposal as well.
Thank you. And after all the other commissioners' comments, I don't think there's a need to rehash all of them for myself, because I agree with almost all of them. But at the same time, I do support this regulation. I do have one question for Tyler, and it was brought up in previous meetings through Nevada Outdoorsman in wheelchairs. The bite down trigger, I know there was discussion of that. I just want to make sure and make clear that that would still be used, because that was one thing we haven't really talked about today. It was talked about, but I know it's not electronic, but I just wanted to be clear that that's one of the tools they use, and that we're in the clear on that.
Thank you, Chairman Wallace. I believe that's correct, and Commissioner Drew can correct me if I'm remembering wrong, but yeah, it seems to me we talked to Commissioner Bliss specifically about the bite trigger, and he talked about it, being more mechanical or hydraulic, and not drawing a connection between the scope and the firing mechanism. I think we're still good there.
Okay. Just to follow up, as I recall it, when we went to the term sighting system, it took away that, even though there's an electronic solenoid in the bite system, it wasn't linked to the sighting system.
Yeah, we had been talking about putting in an exemption for disabled hunters when we had the terminology of electronic trigger. It was a gentleman at the Arrington meeting that pointed out we needed to use better terminology there with computer or electronically controlled firing mechanism. I think that is much better technology and shows that there are people that are better than me at writing this sort of terminology. But I think that terminology, computer or electronically controlled firing mechanism, eliminates that. It has to establish a connection between the scope and the firing mechanism. And as far as the terminology of or versus and, in my mind it says computer-controlled firing mechanism or electronically controlled firing mechanism. That's how I interpret that or. I'm not sure that and is necessary.
That was going to be my other question too. And also to follow up, I just want to make sure that this is the same thing too. I read all the public comment on this. I mean, even some of the emails that actually came last night, I managed to get them and look at it. And I take all of it seriously, regardless of whether it's a group, an individual, Nevada, California, Utah, wherever it comes from. If it comes, I read it. And that's important. That's an important part of the process to me, is that everyone gets their chance. And so I do support where we're at today. And any further questions from the commission? Commissioner McNitch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Tyler, if we were to switch the word electronically and computer, so it would read any firearm that is equipped with any sighting system using an electronically or computer-controlled firing mechanism, does that help clarify that a little more?
Yeah, I think so. I like that.
Say that again, Commissioner McNitch.
I was just okay, so it would read any firearm that is equipped with any sighting system using an electronically or computer-controlled firing mechanism.
Commissioner McNitch, are you just switching electronically and computer?
Just to make it clear, because I can see where after you've made the clarification, it is confusing, for sure. It makes it sound like using a computer or...
Yeah, there's some sort of a sentencing diagramming thing there that my high school English teacher would be happy about. But
if it said computerally...
Yeah, electronically,
yeah.
I think being the first word shows that it's more tied to electronically controlled firing mechanism or a computer-controlled firing mechanism.
That's right. That would be the intent of switching.
Further commission comment?
I've only got one
Commissioner
comment,
Valentine.
and it's procedure at this particular point in time. The regulation, 3/4 of it's fantastic, but as far as my vote goes, if I am not going to support
Commissioner, please speak in the mic. I know you had
if
head
I am not
starting.
going to support the 50 caliber ban, I assume I have to vote nay regarding this regulation. Is that correct?
Yeah, it depends on how the motion is made on
Okay.
that.
All right, thank you.
Chairman Wallace, if I may, one last point, for my own personal satisfaction, I hope I didn't offend anyone by saying that, a lot of the comments I read were from out of state, or that a majority of them don't hunt. I agree, that doesn't minimize their input. I know personally I hunt in several other states, or at least apply in several other states, so I don't want to diminish that input of being from out of state. But I wanted to grab a sample of those letters and try to see who they were that we were getting comments from, and so that's why I made that notation.
Understood. Commissioner Hubbs.
This is just more of a comment, but it goes back to my initial comment before it went out to the public. As I mentioned, I did not receive anything really from any non-hunters regarding this topic, which was surprising to me and also reflected to me that it wasn't really an issue at this time out in the field. But I'm hoping, obviously, that this doesn't become an issue even for non-protected wildlife. I mean, I think we protect all wildlife and respect the manner in which they're taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hubbs. Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, kind of getting back to Commissioner Valentine's question, there have been times where we've broken these out to kind of afford the commissioners to express where they stand on the items, you know, and I see that as a reasonable type of thing here. So, if we're willing, if everybody's done, I'll take a shot at getting this started at least. Okay.
Commissioner McNinch.
So I'd like to make a motion.
Commissioner, don't forget to speak in the mic so they can hear down south.
So I'd like
I mean,
to
up
make a
north.
motion that we accept Commission General Regulation 458, sections, Section 1, subsections 1, 2, 3, and 4, as proposed, except that under subsection 4, it would read, "A person may hunt big game mammals with a centerfire rifle or a handgun if the handgun uses a centerfire cartridge of caliber .22 or larger and has a barrel length of 4 inches or more."
I second that.
I have a motion and a second on the floor. Commissioner McNinch, you had made some wording changes in Section 5A as well, correct?
Yeah, but I'm not including 5 as my, in my proposed motion here.
Okay.
I think my gut feeling tells me that there's going to be some pretty broad support for 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then I'd be prepared to take a shot at the other section as well.
Understood. Just wanted to make sure I was clear too. Commissioner Drew.
Just a clarifying question, Tyler, you're comfortable with the language that's been proposed under 4 in terms of basically we're allowing a centerfire rifle or a handgun? And you're comfortable with that language?
Yeah, if I understand correctly, the notes I made earlier in the discussion, I was trying to listen and write carefully to make sure the notes I made earlier in the discussion agreed with the motion. So to reiterate, a person may hunt big game mammals with a centerfire rifle or a handgun if the handgun ...
Yes.
Okay. Yep, I'm great with that.
Okay.
I have a motion on the floor. Can I have the second again? Was that
seconded the motion,
okay? From Commissioner McNinch, seconded by Commissioner Hubbs to approve as presented with the changes stated through Section 4. I'll call for the question.
Section 1, subsection 4 is how I phrased it.
Okay. I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes unanimously, 8-0.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make another motion to accept that portion of Commission General Regulation 458, subsection, Section 1, subsection 5, as proposed with the following modification. Under 5A, any firearm that is equipped with any sighting system using an electronically or computer-controlled firing mechanism.
I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner McNinch and a second by Commissioner Drew to approve the remaining part of the regulation with the changes stated by Commissioner McNinch.
Can Commissioner McNinch reiterate one more time?
Please speak in the mic again. Sorry.
Yes.
If Commissioner McNinch could reiterate one more time, I would appreciate it. I wasn't quite following that.
Yeah, so my motion was to approve Commission General Regulation 458, Section 1, subsection 5, as proposed, except as noted, with the following change. 5A would read, any firearm that is equipped with any sighting system using, and then here's the change, an electronically or computer-controlled firing mechanism. So I just switched a couple of words to make that clear up some confusing language. Good.
The Commissioner's clear with the motion?
Yes.
And this does include 5B, correct?
It does include 5B,
And
yes.
that's the second's understanding as well.
Yeah.
Oh, and And I'm sorry, and I'd like to clarify my motion, that would include subsection 6 since it's renumbered. So I want to make sure that that's included as well.
That's my understanding,
Sorry.
yep.
All right.
I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. Nay.
Motion carries 7-1 with Commissioner Valentine dissenting.